Does a democracy work for the modern-day Republican Party? Since 1988 the GOP has only won the popular vote once, and that was an incumbent wartime President G.W. Bush. The Electoral College tends to trend with popularity. Furthermore, the GOP's base is white, church-going and old. These demographics are steadily declining in number. Meanwhile, millions of left-leaning millennials are pouring into the voting rolls. What are the GOP's options for success and to stay relevant? Change their platform to appeal to more voters, as any political party does when faced with similar situations. You mean millions of left-leaning Gen Zers are pouring onto the voting rolls? The youngest millennials are in their late 20s. Democracy does not work for them because they want Christoph Facik. It can't work if it allows the equitable participation of those other people over there. What are the GOP's options for success and to stay relevant? 1. Abandon their loathsome ideology, positions, and policies. 2. Continue on their present course of rendering failure impossible and democracy irrelevant through criminally conspiratorial election fraud, voter disenfranchisement, civil rights obliteration, and authoritarian societal control bubble wrapped in brand-specific religious extremism. Republicans have a built-in crutch in the Senate and Electoral College. Basically, they already represent a minority of voters, yet gain majorities half the time. What are the GOP's options for success and to stay relevant? In the future, the GOP can welcome immigrants from Africa, Latin America, and Middle East. These people are religious and conservative, and many dislike modern Western values. Immigrants are a conservative base waiting to explode. Look at Europe. I heard Erdogan got more votes in Europe than in Turkey, or won by a bigger margin. Christ, if they just support some policy that wasn't terrible and only served the one or evangelical Christians, they'd stand a chance. If they hadn't gerrymandered the maps into conservatives' thunderdomes where only radical candidates can win, then they'd stand a chance. As it is, 85% of the population would be voting against their own fiscal interests by voting for them. I'm surprised they do as well as they do. I haven't heard a passable policy idea from Republicans in nearly 15 years. Putting in candidates that switch parties after they win elections. False candidates. Hell, no. It's why they continue and increase their efforts, every year, to make voting more difficult. They so desperately are seeking an authoritarian to take over. The cult-following behavior is alarming. Next step, if we're not already there, is full-blown fascism. If it did, Harlan Crow wouldn't need to buy Supreme Court justices. The GOP is two-faced AF, public-facing lies and public-facing fascism. No, the modern-day Republican Party hates democracy. Their only chance to stay relevant is to gerrymander districts like they do and hope to keep Fox News intact enough to gather more power federally, which will allow them to kill the USA for good and replace it with their Christoph fascist cult that bans truth and only operates on feelings. You realize that Republicans just got more total votes than Democrats in the 2022 House races, right? Nothing is permanent in politics. We have two parties, and those parties have views that shift around all the time. They are coalitions of different voters. When one party gets too powerful, it will inevitably do things that alienate moderates and independents. Well, yeah, democracy is the correct environment for populism, which is their current platform. Right? Look, a presidential candidate could win without majority votes by citizens, so it is not really a pure democracy. Maybe demon-crazy. They have crossed the line into fascism. It's a conundrum though. The USA is not a democracy. But Republicans don't even try to fit into the hybrid system that we normal, sane people comport ourselves in. They are following Hitler's 30s agenda to an item. They are being redemption. We need to accept that fascism is alive and powerfully well in our system. Gerrymandering, the Electoral College, and makeup of the Senate, and control of the Supreme Court all currently work against Democrats. The institutional structure of the US currently works against Democrats, not Republicans. Both racism and conservatism have multi-generational staying power. Liberals tend to incorrectly think they are passing fads of the dying older generation. Millennials were only 4 Dem in 2022. That's a shift from 34 Obama in 2008. Taking the same voters 1830 in 2008, 3044 in 2022. The gap in 2022 appears to be Gen Z young women. Women under 30 haven't regularly as long as we have data been big midterm voters. Obviously the Dobbs decision played a role in that. Every other group shifted away from Dems comparing 2018 to 2022. I think people overestimate the idea that once you select a party you stay that way for life. The older you get the more fearful you become and thus more susceptible to the GOP message of fear and hatred. Once young and liberal Gen Xers are already becoming old GOP voters. The popular vote can swing any moment. Right now the Dems have it, so they preach democracy. But that can change as people's values and opinions change. There's no guarantee the masses want modern Western-style liberalism indefinitely. Both parties have an elite that wants to impose its values on the populace. I happen to agree mostly with the Dems, but I don't think the Dems are better off than the Repubs in a pure democracy. I think Repubs might be more suited in a pure democracy than the Dems are in the long run. They just need to appeal to younger voters, non-whites. Jan 6 riot was a threat to the Republic. But it was not a threat to democracy. We are done, Dem supermajority in less than 2 generations, when they will have 38 states, Senate, POTUS, SCOTUS, etc. Pete Buttigieg can take his electric vehicles and his bicycles and he and his husband can stay out of our girls' bathrooms. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Today's Republican Party in a nutshell, peanut. In 2022, 50.7% of people voted for a Republican to represent them in Congress. 47.6% of people voted for a Democrat to represent them in Congress. Seems democracy worked just fine for Republicans as 51% of Congress is Republican. Democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep voting over what is for dinner. Democracy is also mob rule. It doesn't work here or the countries we have tried to force it on. America is now a uni-party system. There is no difference between the Republicans and Democrats. They have an unlimited checkbook and they will spend it until the world moves on to a different central currency. Soon as the dollar is replaced by whatever the rest of the world decides, the piper will be paid. What they should do is rethink their outdated beliefs and try to change with the times. What they will do is dig in their heels and try to overcome democracy through backhanded tactics. Republicans don't need to work with democracy as the Senate grants Wyoming 578,000 people the same amount of representation as California 40 million people. If you took California's 40 million people and you'd subtract the populations of the least populated US states, you'd fill more than half of the Senate before you'd reach 40 million people. While I would consider the Democrats the lesser of 2 evils, it is foolish to think that only Republicans are a hindrance to democracy. Democrats are just as corrupt, doing backrooms deals and screwing over their constituents for money.